first moved here, we would enjoy like watching the little seaplanes come in and out, the little charters.
In general, I would prefer if it were not there.
It's just part of the hyperconsumption.
Detrimental health effects due to pollution.
It's all more and more and more and more and more.
My house overlooked Tweed New Haven Airport. Growing up, I barely noticed it. It just faded into the background. But recently, there's been some big changes. Now there's deafening jets every hour, a million speed bumps, and more pollution in the nearby wetlands. Let me give you the timeline. On May 6th, 2021, airport officials held a press conference.
It's a historic day, not just for this airport, not just for New Haven and East Haven, but for the entire region.
They're there to announce a $100 million master plan that will give Tweed a new terminal, expand its runway, and support maintenance and community benefits. Attending are numerous politicians and news networks. This is Sean Scanlon, Tweed's executive director. He's kind of the expansion's figurehead.
After years of debates and dreams, we finally have a viable plan to move Tweed Airport forward.
The event had 3 goals. First was to get the working class on board.
1,000 temporary construction jobs.
And 175 new permanent jobs here at the airport.
Second, they were also beckoning tourists. 4 Florida destinations were announced, with more southern cities to follow. A year later, there's 13, plus Chicago. Pretty soon, billboards popped up around the state, from Waterbury to Westbrook.
And it's offering low rates. A seat on the flight starts at only $49.
Though as you'd expect, they do go much higher.
This is our whole strategy is really about taking advantage or leveraging opportunities like this, where you have a secondary airport in a larger metro area.
The last goal was to show the neighborhood the true weight of $100 million. The new lease would extend 43 years, which isn't exactly a test run. You got the sense it was set in stone. The marketing wouldn't have gone forward without a lot of confidence. People felt railroaded.
I don't feel that they're being honest with the community.
They also proposed to repeal the city ordinance banning planes over 80 tons. This would allow larger and larger aircraft to fly through, such as cargo flights. That September, the Board of Alders, New Haven's legislative body, voted unanimously to approve these plans. At an earlier meeting, New Haven's mayor got up to defend the expansion.
And let's just be clear about that. If you don't support the airport, like, tough luck, right? And I hate to say it that way, but the airport is here. Listen to the way. Hang on a sec, folks.
This isn't the first time Tweed's pushed its limits. The runway extended slightly in 2015, and those public meetings also got heated.
You're going to count the bodies one at a time of our children and our grandchildren when they're hit by cars. Those lights, those stop signs are not going to stop what's going to happen in our area.
The main force opposing Tweed is 10,000 Hawks, named after the migrating birds Tweed displaces. They're based in Morris Cove, more broadly known as the East Shore, where Rachel Harima has lived for 10 years.
I founded 10,000 Hawks last May. It's about a year old.
Rachel is a local activist, gardener, and development consultant.
I had been working on this issue since at least 2018, but realizing that Tweed Airport Authority had brought in privatization money, I wanted to stop that.
You can spot her at that meeting in 2015. She's been at this a long time. We set up on her back porch. Even a mile from the terminal, the ambience was pretty loud. I asked her about the Hawks' values.
We want clean air, good soil for the garden, no lead, no hydrocarbons coming down, the ability to breathe, the ability to sleep, not a lot of flooding, and of course no planes crashing.
Tweed's problems soon became obvious.
People are getting woken up at 6 and they're getting woken up at midnight because the planes are late coming back from Florida. When it's really foggy out, planes circle several times in order to land. And people are smelling the jet fumes. And there's traffic issues, of course, already.
And passengers aren't spared.
People would tell me, oh, it was crazy landing, it was really foggy, we were delayed.
Long-term goals involve legislation and litigation. but most of the Hawks' day-to-day is helping disgruntled residents see the big picture.
Let's look at this from an organic, geographic level. This isn't a city or town or municipal issue. This is an issue of land and water. Tweed sits on a coastal floodplain, which affects all of us. We have a national partner called the Anthropocene Alliance, which specifically focuses on flooding, and with sea level rise, that'll become an increasing issue. The way they work it is to link us up with other allies. So we have a volunteer who's a retired EPA administrator and attorney helping us understand what's our best strategy. We also have Save the Sound, who we talk to regularly.
Tweed's pollution is one of the key issues for Rachel.
I do think that people are unaware of the health impacts of noise, just how dangerous ultrafine particulate matter pollution is.
Ultrafine particles go straight into the bloodstream from the lungs, reaching the brain and other organs. They're carcinogenic and increase the risk of heart disease and brain damage.
And then there's the volatile organic chemicals and nitrogen oxide, which in sunlight turns into ground level ozone.
Ground level ozone can damage the lungs and annihilate crops. As a gardener, Rachel must be worried.
I feel really strongly that if you really take a look at this thing, it's a bad dog. It really does not make sense to put the smack dab in the middle of several residential neighborhoods.
Rachel has led the Hawks down one main avenue.
Really, we want to see what comes out of the environmental assessment draft.
For Tweed's plan to go forward, the Environmental Protection Agency requires they complete an environmental assessment, or EA.
They look at a bunch of different categories, including things like water, coastal impacts, air, soil, birds and animals and fishies, just a whole bunch of things.
But the EA can be driven by citizens.
What happens next is there's a EA comment period, and that's when we get to look at all the stacks of data, things like that, and pick it apart and put in a bunch of comments about, you're not seeing this correctly, this is understated, this is missing. We have 30 days to do that. Then the consultants need to reply and respond to all the comments.
If the EA determines there's enough impact on human life and the environment, it'll mandate an EIS, which is far more comprehensive. That's a big goal for the Hawks.
If it turns into an environmental impact statement, they can look more broadly. Okay, we need to do additional soil sampling. We need to do more noise monitoring. That's what we're hoping for.
To get there, the Hawks are urging Tweed to be thorough.
The environmental assessment is required. This isn't some nice thing Tweed is doing out of large S, which is how it's been pitched in PR campaigns by the airport. Tweed gets to hire who they want. They've hired the people who did the master plan, who created the plan to do the assessment.
Who regulates who has become a big deal.
We just stopped a bill that was going to exempt Tweed Airport from regulatory oversight. The State Department of Transportation, they have an agreement with CAA, Connecticut Airport Authority, and Tweed wanted to be exempted from that. So we stopped that.
As a public airport, Tweed is regulated by both the EPA and the Federal Aviation Administration.
The FAA and the EPA don't agree. The EPA wants tighter regulations. The FAA is like, no, it's fine.
They get the velvet glove more than the iron fist. The FAA regulates Tweed's boundaries.
I mean, there's some environmental regulatory stuff that is still EPA, but in terms of can you extend the runway, what kind of buildings can you construct, it's mostly FAA now.
Rachel believes the expansion isn't just unnecessary, it's regressive.
Nationally and internationally, everybody's looking at a green jobs approach. And this harkens back to before the Clean Air Act of the 1960s. We all want good jobs and we all want a good economy, but at what cost?
Avelo flights started over 6 months ago. Besides more than doubling parking space and flooding those lots with 24-hour heavy-duty security lighting, construction has been minimal.
You're already able to do the kinds of commercial passenger level air travel that you want to do. Just leave it here. Leave it here.
There's a fear of neighborhood decimation, which has happened before.
One of the things that happened in New Haven, they really plowed through an intact neighborhood of predominantly African-American families to build this Route 34 connector. Even now, it's just a wasteland between other communities.
Over 800 families were displaced. Today, the connector is being redesigned to undo the damage done, but Tweed's expansion may cause similar devastation.
If Tweed expansion goes forward the way they're planning, 1,000 feet, in the master plan, there's also an indication that within 20 years, they should build out an additional 1,000 feet on top of that. That bumps them out of their current fence line.
With the Tweed monolith growing, it feels like residents are losing their agency.
That's talking about buying homes, doing eminent domain on homes. Right now they're trucking in jet fuel in a roundabout way. They're probably looking for a pipeline or a straight line route to do that.
Tweed has tried to compensate for quality of life issues. They've contracted companies to give homes in a certain radius free HVAC, insulation, and soundproofing work. But many recipients have reported shoddy workmanship. For instance, I haven't been able to open my bedroom window for a year because of an installation mistake. Tweed's also made inroads about rezoning.
There's a small road called Proto Drive on the East Haven side, which leads to a transfer station. And that is a pivotal piece of land that would need to be transferred from the town of East Haven to Tweed Airport or have it be rezoned.
Tweed's development is far behind Bradley International's, 50 miles upstate. The risks are immense, and to Rachel, they're obvious.
This is coastal. This is coastal. I walk 400 feet that way, and I'm on sand. This is ridiculous. We should be moving things inland. Bradley needs more support. It's failing. So why are we setting up competition here?
The future is very uncertain.
Is it sustainable given the inflation, given the cost of gas? We'll see. We'll see.
Rhododendron. Oh, I can't look back. I lost it all on this one-way track. Don't turn your back on the mainland. Don't turn your back on the mainland. Don't turn your back on the mainland. Rhododendron.
Rachel is staunchly anti-Tweed, but feelings of dread are everywhere. To get another perspective, I sat down with Emily McMelbourne. She's a high school science teacher at New Haven Academy and has also lived near Tweed for a decade. Like Rachel, she gardens.
I personally don't think it's a great investment.
To her, traffic is a big issue.
There are a dozen new speed bumps in my neighborhood, and in order to get out of my neighborhood, I can't avoid any of them. It's not the worst thing ever, but it's irritating.
She anticipates water pollution.
Before they built the fence over the little stream there, my dog would love to dip down into that stream and play, and I'm sure my kids would as well. But with increased air travel, I probably wouldn't allow them to. I am certain there's all kinds of stuff running off into that stream, and there will be even more as flights increase.
Recent hurricanes have made New Haven's waterways overflow, and this is expected to increase. For years, the state has been projecting Long Island Sound could rise 20 inches by 2050, leaving most of the existing runway underwater.
At the current moment, I don't think it floods very frequently. My house is in a flood zone, and like I said, I'm 5 doors from the site of Tweed Airport. So at the moment, it's not an issue. But I wouldn't put my money into it.
When 2050 does roll around, McMelbourne's students will be ready.
We spend half a year looking at climate change, the causes of climate change, the effects of climate change. It is a significant portion of Connecticut's science curriculum. So this upcoming generation will no longer go, what? Climate change or global warming. They understand that is in fact exactly what we're talking about.
She told me that for her, Tweed is a mixed bag.
I have flown out of Tweed. It is very convenient to not have to drive to Bradley or New York. So that is beneficial.
She said she'd never noticed any pollution or adverse health effects from Tweed, but that fundamentally it shouldn't expand.
It's an airport in a residential neighborhood. It really should never have become anything more than private planes and maybe a hopper jet to New York and DC for a morning commute and afternoon commute. It shouldn't be a big airline.
She admits the solution is complicated.
Other airports, they are not a stone's throw from people's homes where, kids play in the backyard. But I don't know how they can address that without saying, let's find a broader open space that isn't in a residential neighborhood.
McMelbourne highlights a conundrum. Flights are going to happen. It just matters how, where, and how often.
Should we figure out a way to do it that isn't dumping boatloads of carbon into the atmosphere? Yes. At the same time, I have 2 sisters. One lives in LA and one lives in Germany. I can't reasonably see either without someone getting on a plane.
But innovation's on the horizon.
There's some interesting work being done on electric airplanes. That seems really promising to me.
I would pay extra for the knowledge that the plane ride I'm taking is less damaging to the environment. But we're not there yet.
On the other hand, we're already seeing how big institutions can oppose progressive change. Tweed is managed by Avports, a subsidiary of Goldman Sachs.
We were basically given this Goldman Sachs deal as a fait accompli.
After famously profiting off the 2008 financial crisis, the investment bank suborned the Malaysian government during an embezzlement scheme. Rachel knows the neighborhood is intimidated.
So we are talking about major international players who have deep pockets. They have high litigation rates if you look at their financial filings. They thought that we would crumble. And I think they, to a certain extent, think that we're just a small group of rowdy women or discontented women. Not recognizing like the number and the power of us that see this for what it is.
She thinks Tweed's investors are disconnected.
We have not had the amount of two-way communication that would be helpful for community planning. I know a lot of people have personal animus towards individuals. That's not the way I work, really. I try not to make it personal, and I try to just go for the issues and the facts.
Before the Alder vote, public input was muffled.
It was all on Zoom, despite the fact that we had gathered within a matter of 2 days 100 signatures on a petition. Please let us do this in person. Please let's have a conversation.
McMelbourne agreed and urged further action.
It wasn't as broadly publicized that it was going to be voted on as I would have liked. I would love to see the neighborhood step in and say, listen, there need to be some limits because we live here. Like, this is not wide open space. When your airplanes are taking off, they make a lot of noise. They do a lot of pollution.
One factor is Yale University, which occupies large sections of New Haven.
Yale has always come in and given testimony at the New Haven Board of Alders whenever this issue has come up, favorable to expansion. What we don't know is how much money they put behind it in terms of PR. Is Goldman Sachs carrying that now? Probably, but was Yale carrying that before Goldman Sachs came into the picture?
Rachel fears Yale has tunnel vision.
If you look at it from Yale's self-interest, they would have the ability to bring in conferences, international speakers, international students. So for them, from a very narrow perspective, it makes sense. They don't have to live right next to it. They don't have students living right here being poisoned. They don't have to listen to the noise.
I asked Rachel whether she thought Morris Cove and the Hawks were better off now than a year ago.
I think we are still winding up, or like a flywheel. I think there's more activism and impact to come, so we're just getting started.
She's clearly optimistic.
I mean, the great thing is they see us as a very strong force, and so all these things are trying to contain us. The nice thing is that it's not working.
On the other hand, McMelbourne is not as hopeful and fears for her lifestyle.
I grow food that I eat in my backyard. I'd prefer not to have aviation gas landing on the produce that I plan to eat. I mean, here's the thing. It's a done deal, and it seems to have been done a little bit underhanded.
But they do agree that lines have been drawn.
We really need people power on this. It just fell as a thunderclap on all of us, on top of us, not with us, not for us, on us.
That's a good shot. That might be the credit shot right there. That might just be the credit shot. The kayakers.
Shove